Time for our weekly visit with Pierre LeBrun, our TSN hockey insider. Pierre, it's been well documented that players who were left off of their respective Four Nations face-off teams seem to all be lighting it up at the same time since they were left off those teams. And I know this week in The Athletic, you specifically wrote about American Jason Robertson and Canadian Wyatt Johnston of the Dallas Stars and how well they've played since they were left off their respective teams. And I love that your piece started with the following words. Coincidence? Don't think so. What do you make, Pierre, of all these snubbed players who've been lighting up recently?
I think the numbers don't lie, Jay. And, you know, I love the honesty that both Robertson and Johnston talked about it with me, because it's easy for a pro athlete, I think, to say, nah, you guys are making more out of that than it really is. That is not the sense that I got after talking to these two guys. You know, in the case of Wyatt Johnston, he understands that his slow start to the season certainly cost him a spot on Team Canada's Four Nations team, but he said he has used it as motivation ever since he found out he wasn't on the team. And look at his numbers, look at his play. He's playing the best hockey of the season. And for him, it's all about keeping Team Canada's attention, because there's a bigger tournament in 13 months with the Olympic Games, and that's where he has his eyes set now. In terms of Jason Robertson and Team USA, he probably was the biggest name left off Team USA. He said he wasn't shocked because, again, he had a slow start because of the foot surgery that he had in the summer. But what he said, which was a bit different than Wyatt Johnston, but again, it's sort of a glimpse into a star player's thinking. He said it was a burden to some degree, that he kept thinking about it. Am I going to be on, off, on, off? And when he realized he was named to Team USA, in some ways, he was relieved. As disappointed as he was, it helped him sort of turn the page and reset himself for the season and look at his numbers ever since Team USA was named. So it just goes to show you that, you know, and there's other players, obviously, Mark Scheifele, John Tavares, Matt Duchene. I spoke with Matt Duchene this week. He was disappointed. I mean, he was in serious consideration for Team Canada, Jay. These guys care. I mean, this is what makes best-on-best hockey the greatest thing alive. And I know some fans are taking a while to warm up to this idea of Four Nations. What is this? I get it. It's the appetizer to the Olympics. But if you talk to the players who didn't make it, you understand why best on best is unbelievable. It matters so much to them, for those who made it and for those who didn't make it.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the playoffs this year because I feel like every Canadian team could get in, Pierre. Every Canadian team is either in a playoff spot or real close to one. I mean, Montreal is 2 points out. They're the lowest team in Canada. Currently, everybody else is higher than that, and we're 50 days away from the trade deadline. So my question for you, Pierre LeBrun, do you see a scenario, Trade Center, you're sitting there, you're enjoying your Harveys, you're breaking trades, and you're discovering through the course of the day that all 7 Canadian teams are buyers at the deadline? Pierre, is that going to happen or what?
First of all, hopefully I'm enjoying Trade Center because you don't have a T-shirt with my face on it. That would be number one. Let's start with that. No pressure, but let's try not to do that. They're not all going to be buyers. And here's the thing, you know, people always ask buyers or sellers. There's a third category, which is, you know, kind of stay put. And Montreal's a great example since you mentioned them. They might be the lowest of the 7 Canadian teams. They're also the hottest of the 7 Canadian teams. You know, they've got some prominent pending UFAs, certainly Jake Evans, but also Yoel Armia and David Savard. And, you know, teams have already started calling on them. If the Habs stay in the race and decide not to move any of those guys, and that's not decided either. The Habs very much have decided let's let the next 7-8 weeks play out before we make that call. But if the Habs don't trade those guys, that, in a way, is a major decision. It's not buying, it's not selling, but it's saying we don't want to hurt our chances to make the playoffs. We want to give this team every chance. It's earn every chance to try and compete. So that's the third category. I could see, you know, a Montreal, an Ottawa, a Calgary trying to give their teams the best shot possible by not selling. But the idea of buying when you're on the bubble, those 3 teams in particular, I don't see that either, Jay. It doesn't make any sense for Montreal in particular to start spending future assets to add a rental when you're not even sure of making the playoffs. So I don't think buying is in the cards at all. But obviously the big teams, you know, Edmonton Oilers, Winnipeg Jets, Toronto Maple Leafs, absolutely they're buyers. The Leafs want a center. The Oilers want to upgrade their blue line. You know, the Jets, I'm not sure yet. They're so deep, and they've been relatively healthy this year. So I think Kevin Cheveldayoff is still waiting to see where he'd like that.
We are now a little past the halfway point of the NHL season. Usually, Pierre, this is when you and I would discuss potential Hart Trophy candidates. But the thing about this season is that there's no clear-cut favorite. I mean, there's a favorite in Leon Draisaitl, but he's a slight favorite. And as you see here with the odds brought to you by FanDuel, it is wide open. Connor Hellebuyck right up there and making a very strong case as a goaltender for the Hart Trophy. Is there someone who's ahead of the pack at this point, in your point of view, Pierre LeBrun?
Yeah, I think it's Draisaitl, but I will say this, and McKinnon's in there. Kaprizov got hurt, I think, by his injury. A guy that no one mentions is Jack Eichel. Jack Eichel is having an unbelievable year. I think his best season in the NHL, and Vegas is in first place, so he's more of a dark horse. But Connor Hellebuyck is such an interesting case to be made here. The Winnipeg Jets are nowhere close to where they are in the standings without him. But I don't know that he gets that kind of recognition because there are other star players on this team, right? I mean, Connor and Scheifele and Morrissey. The last goalie to win the Hart was Carey Price in 2014-15. It is rare for the goalie to win the MVP. You know, the Vezina is special enough. I say this all the time, but pitchers have the Cy Young in baseball. They don't need the MVP, right? I mean, that's basically how it works in baseball. And so goalies so rarely win the Hart. I mean, before Carey Price in 14-15, it was Jose Theodore in 2001 too. It's really rare. Your season has to be above extraordinary, it seems, for the voters, you know, to give it to a goalie. I think Connor Hellebuyck is having that season right now.
Yep.
Now we'll see if he can continue it. There's a whole second half. But I would argue that while the Jets would still be a playoff team, I don't think they're battling for first overall in the league if it were not for the exploits of Connor Hellebuyck. And I think more people need to recognize that in my mind. Just
another reason for Canadians to be concerned about the upcoming Four Nations face-off, because he'll be a net for the States. We'll now shift our focus to one of your great loves, Pierre, the Dallas Cowboys, who this week decided to part ways with Mike McCarthy as their head coach. A lot of fascinating names being thrown around, like Jason Witten, and maybe the most intriguing one, another former Dallas Cowboy, a Hall of Famer, Deion Sanders. Pierre, your thoughts on a potential Deion Sanders to the Cowboys coaching gig, or is there another name out there that's a dream name for you?
Well, I've already shared my dream name with you weeks ago. It's not going to happen, especially now that the Rams won their first playoff game. You know I love the idea of Sean McVay somehow getting tired of the Rams and wanting a new challenge. I don't see that happening now. So he'd be my number one guy, and he's not available. Listen, I think there's a lot of excitement in thinking about Deion Sanders. I find myself arguing with myself about this throughout the day. Because on the one hand, there's just something so enticing about, you know, his personality and the way that he's got all these young players playing for him in Colorado. I think there's a great story there. And yet, coaching college and coaching the NFL is a different thing. And you know, is he ready for that kind of challenge? I don't know. I'm a hockey guy, not a football guy. But there is something in there that I think would be pretty darn exciting because that kind of stage is made for him.
Yep.
I also think he's got the kind of personality that can handle Jerry Jones. But having said all that, at the end of the day, no matter who they hire, and I've said this before, no matter who the Cowboys hire, the GM is still the owner. And I'll just end it there.
That is an excellent way to end it. Always great to chat with you. Enjoy the divisional round this weekend, buddy. We'll chat with you next week.
Right on, right on.